All right, since we are officially at 7:01, let me start off by saying welcome and thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening for our college list building webinar. My name is Alyssa Coltrane. I'm the Director of College Admissions for Ivy Experience. This is my colleague, Jordan Holmes. And for the next, hour or so, we'll take you through a variety of factors to consider when it comes to building a college list, how to do research, when and how to visit campuses, and of course, our favorite part is to answer all of your questions at the end. If you are going to put in a question, please feel free to do so. We'll take all of the questions at the end of the session. So if you want to go ahead and leave those in the Q&A section down at the bottom of your screen. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started.
So, one of the first parts to consider when thinking about your college list is this idea of match and fit. Every single school on your list should be a fit in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's a reach school, a target school, or a likely school, all of that, which we will talk about later in this webinar, all of them should make sense for you and make sure that they are something that you're excited to go to. And the way that you can think about this is kind of amorphous idea of fit, the idea that everything works among certain categories. You can think about it in these four different categories here, and we'll go through each of them individually in just a moment. Again, the physical or the financial fit is kind of one of the more important topics to talk about. We'll talk about that in depth in a moment. There's, of course, social as well, which is thinking about who goes there. Physical fit is more of like where it is. And then notice that academic fit is actually last on this list. Because especially if you're thinking about kind of ubiquitous topics like business or engineering or economics or things like that, those many schools across the country are going to have good programs or programs that will fit with you. If, however, you're thinking of aerospace engineering or marine biology, Alyssa and I can rattle off the school that you're going to apply to because those are the ones that make sense for you. For example, you're probably not going to go to Kansas to study marine biology. No marine life anywhere nearby. But again, these are all things that you can consider when you're thinking about the idea of fit. And again, we'll start talking about financial fit first. Financial fit is something that, again, is incredibly important. We hope that you ignore the sticker price when you look at the cost of tuition, room and board at a specific school, and instead pay attention to the net price. That net price means that it's the tuition price and that full cost of attendance subtracted by, or rather, then you take away the financial aid that you will receive between need-based financial aid and merit-based financial aid. And that results in the net price. And that's actually what you're more likely to pay than the full sticker price. Very few students and families end up paying the full sticker price. And one of the ways that you can find out there's some information about that net price is either by going to the collegescorecard.ed.gov, and you can take a look at each of the institution's scorecards there and see what the average net price ends up being. There's also then a net price calculator available on most, actually not most, all legally required, all college websites, and where you can sit with your family or as a family. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to fill out, and you'll need some financial information to fill it out. But it'll give you a very ballpark estimate as far as what a financial aid package could look like. Of course, keeping in mind that each institution might change their parameters year to year. But again, pay attention to the net price versus the sticker price. We also really want to make sure that you're having these conversations early and often. We would absolutely love for you to have these conversations as a family. When you designate time to chat about this, make sure that all the information is out on the table. I would much rather, and we would much rather have students not apply to somewhere because it's not a realistic financial option versus having someone say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can't go there because we can't afford it." Things happen, we know, but at the same time, have that conversation early and often. And again, don't necessarily rule it out of school just because of cost as you move forward throughout this process. When we think about social fit, we're thinking about the types of people who are on campus. The students, the faculty, professors, what are they like? Excuse me. What are they like? What are important, or what are some important factors for them? Are there interesting clubs? How is the social scene both on campus and off campus? But we'll talk about in physical fit in just a moment. But again, thinking about the kind of vibe, you are totally allowed to say this is a weird vibe and I don't like this. All of that counts, right? How you interact with a campus, how you talk to people on campus when you interact with them, all that absolutely matters. And feeling like you can fit in, or whether you do fit in on campus. Now, of course, this is going to be a very limited perspective that you might have, whether it be a campus visit or a conversation with a friend or two. But either way, listen to yourself because you know yourself better than anybody else does. Also keep in mind the student demographics, right? Are most students from the state where that college is located? Are most students international? Does that matter to you? If so, keep that in mind and take a look at the statistics, both on paper and then also when you go to visit the campuses as well. Next is physical fit. Thinking about where the college is going to be really important to you. Statistically, not a lot of students end up traveling more than, say, 500 miles away from home in order to attend college. However, if you're like, nope, I want to go farther than that, I want to go to the other side of the country, that's completely okay. But understanding your ideas or limitations, what you are and what you're not comfortable with, is a really helpful way to geographically narrow down the schools that you want to look at as well. Also, again, thinking like vibes, weather is really important too. As we were just talking about, do you want to be in snowy northern New England in February, or do you want to be in Miami where it's 78 degrees in February? Either way, the choice is yours, but that is something that you can absolutely consider as you consider your college list. Weather is important, how you feel on campus is important too. And then in-state and out-of-state as well, beyond the financial considerations for that. Geographically, again, are you okay with staying closer to home? Do you want to go somewhere farther away? What sort of setting do you want to be in as well? Whether it be urban or rural or suburban or college town feel, whatever it is, getting a sense of what that is for you and what's important to you will be really helpful to start narrowing down your college list. And finally, academic fit. Thinking about which majors and subjects interest you and whether the colleges you are thinking about have those specific subjects. Also thinking about class sizes too, and the academic experience that you're going to have in the classroom. Are you comfortable with lectures? Do you want to have a smaller setting where you're more intimately involved with the instructor? Conversations like that and discovering answers like that can be incredibly helpful as well. Also thinking about the flexibility of the curriculum. If you are someone who wants to embrace the liberal arts and wants to embrace this kind of diverse way of thinking in your college experience, thinking about a school that embraces that and has that built into their curriculum can be very helpful. And also faculty research. Lots of institutions have some sort of access to faculty research. However, the ease of which to engage with that or the way that it's counted in the curriculum can be a factor as well. If that's something that you're really interested in, then seek out that information on the campuses that you're thinking about as well. And regardless of the kind of school that you're applying to, whether it be a Reach or Target or a Likely school, they're likely going to have some sort of professor research and a way to start thinking about your academic experience on campus. And speaking about research, or rather Reach, Targets, and Likelies, Alyssa, can you take us through a little bit of that?
Yes. So one of the reasons why we wanted to start this webinar with a discussion of the fit of a school is whether a school is a Reach, a Target school, or a Likely school. And I'm about to take you through what those are and how to identify this. Every single school on your list should be a fit for you, whether it is in any of those three categories. But we know as students begin to shape their college list, one of the things that we are hoping to ensure is that at the end of this process, that the student and their families have options to be able to potentially weigh financial aid offers, to visit the schools again and make a decision between two, to be able to make a choice rather than simply be chosen. And one of the ways that you do this is by making up a college list that has Reach schools, Target schools, and Likely schools. In this case, briefly to just define these terms, A reach school is a school that a student is unlikely to be admitted to. The target school are going to be your sort of 50-50 coin toss shots where the student is possibly going to be admitted to a school. And then the final category is going to be those likely schools. And then, going to be those likely schools where the student is, likely to be admitted. So, how do we determine whether a school is a reach, a target, or a likely? And if we take a look at the next slide here, one of the ways to determine this is to primarily look at these academic factors. For those of you who have attended webinars with us in the past, we will frequently talk about the 5 factors under your control, but when it comes to identifying whether a school is a reach, a target, or a likely, it's going to be those academic factors that ultimately help you make that determination. That is going to be the cumulative GPA of the student, the class rank, the rigor of their high school classes, that first factor, that academic classroom-based component, as well as the SAT and ACT score. Essentially, you take your students' profile, you compare it to the averages of the school. One of the best ways to do this is by looking at the common data set. You can find this. Almost every school is going to publish this information simply by searching University of X common data set. It's going to be in section C. For schools that have Naviance or SCORE or a similar program, this is also a great resource to use, and in some ways is even going to be more powerful than the common data set. Because when you look at the common data set, you are looking at the aggregate data of all of the accepted enrolled students for that college, no matter where they applied. From where they're applied, no matter their specific circumstances. Whereas if you're looking at Naviance, you've controlled a lot of variables. You're looking at the results from students from your high school that are going to be, in many ways, similar applicants to you. So, what does that look like here? And in this case, we're going to take you through a series of examples here, both to highlight how you do this generally, but also some very specific things to keep in mind as you're trying to suss out whether a school is a target, a reach, or a likely school. So University of Vermont, if you were to go on their common data set, their middle 50th percentile of SAT and ACT scores, if you lined all of their accepted admitted students up in a row based on SAT score and took the middle half, is going to be between 1270 and 1410 on the SAT, or a 29 to a 32 on the ACT. They have an average GPA of 3.85 out of an unweighted 4.0 scale. So for a student whose standardized test scores is going to meet or exceed that 75th percentile, so in the case of Vermont, having an SAT score of over 1410, this school is going to be a likely school for them. For a student whose SAT score is going to fall in the middle of that range between that 25th and 75th percentile, this is going to be a target school for them. And then for a student who falls below that threshold, this is going to be a reach school. One of the things to keep in mind, although University of Vermont is fairly egalitarian when it comes to students they admit in-state versus out-of-state, there is a little bit of a difference there, but not by much, about 11%. When you are looking at the big public schools, be mindful of what their requirements are when it comes to the number of students that they must admit in-state or out-of-state. because depending on the system, that can be a significant proportion. I think University of Carolina, the system is like 80 or 90% must be North Carolina residents, which means for an out-of-state applicant, the information that you're looking at on their common data set, their middle 50th percentile for the SAT, that average GPA might not necessarily be the best gauge of your chances for an out-of-state applicant. So let's dive into a little bit more detail about each category of school. When it comes to our reach schools, these are in some ways often the schools that, students come to us and immediately know that they want to apply to. These are often the schools that have the highest level of prestige. These are going to be the schools where a student's GPA, class rank, or test score is going to be below that 25th percentile, or the overall acceptance rate is 15% or lower. One of the things to bear in mind here, and we'll talk more about the importance of starting your college search by looking within and thinking about what is best for you, is simply because you have heard of a school, it might not be the best fit for you. There are highly prestigious universities that won't be a fit for a student for academic reasons or social reasons. So even at the top of this list, we're going to want to make sure that we have schools that are a fit for the student financially, socially, physically, and academically. The one component I want to flag here, and our example on our next slide is going to be really important, and a great example of showing this is that we have that acceptance rate to keep in mind. For high achieving students, as acceptance rates to schools tick downward as more and more students apply, and the number of spots at a given institution remains the same, you will have students for whom, based on their statistics, a given school should be a target school or a likely school. And that's the case here for student A. That 1540 that 1540 SAT is going to fall in Vanderbilt's 25th to 75th percentile. The GPA is accurate, is on point, but for that 6.3% acceptance rating, because Vanderbilt is simply denying so many students, this is something that we would still categorize as a reach for that student. This is also something that comes into consideration when we talk about target schools. In this case, our target schools, to remind you, is going to be those schools where the test scores fall between the 25th and 75th percentile of accepted students. These are the schools where there is, a solid probable chance of being accepted. It is that practical balance between what a student would hope for and what is possible. This can often be a great source of merit scholarships. It's one of the places where students can flesh out the options in a college list, but there are a couple of key components to think through here when it comes to target schools, one of which is that component of targets in some ways for high achieving students are a disappearing breed. And Jordan, I don't know if you wanted to chime in about that one potentially.
Yeah, it's the same thing that you were talking about beforehand, and thinking about how colleges really want to protect their yield, and the yield being the number of students that they've admitted versus the number of students that say yes, that creates the yield rate. when you have a student who's very high achieving, who applies to a couple of target schools, schools are savvy enough to look at a student's statistics and say, we're probably their target school. We're probably a likely school for them. So they might then try to again protect their yield and maybe defer them, or maybe put them on a wait list, or do it, or rather have a decision that is not an admit because they're predicting that they're going to get in somewhere else and then say yes to that place versus their institution. So both with yield protecting and with disappearing breed, the target rather being a disappearing breed, that kind of go hand in hand, which is quite unfortunate because you could have been really excited about that yields, rather about the target school. But again, the shrinking kind of category is affecting a lot of students, especially at the higher end.
Yes, especially when you have students who are high achieving, they're looking for schools where, based on the statistics, like the Vanderbilt slide for the last example, where that school would have been a target if it were not for the acceptance rate. And when it comes to protecting yield, just to give a brief example there, this is anyone who has planned a wedding or a large event knows how this works. You send out a certain number of invitations, expecting that a certain number of people are going to tell you no. But for colleges, the number of people who, RSVP and say yes, that is something that is factored into, for instance, US News and World Report rankings. It's considered to be a sign of prestige. So figuring out ways to ensure that your yield, the number of students who tell you yes, is higher, can help the school rise in those rankings. It's advantageous for them. It helps them attract more students. And one of the classic examples here, and this is why we've chosen Tulane for this example, is Tulane University. They are notorious for accepting large swaths of their school, of their freshman class from their early decision pools. I suppose we have to, give them some credit. Last year, they admitted 200 students regular decision as opposed to 106 a couple of years back. But in this case, you can see the difference in acceptance rates between the overall rate, that 15% is going to be early action, early decision, and regular decision averaged out, versus a 68% admit rate for early decision. And as we are starting to weigh this, you can see where that might affect how we would classify a school based on whether or not the student is choosing to apply early decision. The last category I want to talk about here is ultimately going to be our likely schools. And although I think for many students, this is perhaps the least exciting part of the list, in some ways, it is the most crucial. We always advise students to have at least 2 or 3 of these quote unquote insurance policy schools where they would truly be happy. And some of that is thinking through, what do I want in a school? These are going to be schools where your test scores are at or above the 75th percentile of accepted students. They're a great way to reduce anxiety or pressure in this process, especially if you're applying to some of those state schools with rolling admissions. It can take a lot of weight off to get that first acceptance back and be able to go, all right, I am going to college somewhere. But one of the other important things to keep in mind is these are the schools that are going to be most likely to offer merit scholarships, are going to be the most likely to offer inclusion to an honors college, who are going to be most likely to offer other incentives to students that they are hoping to retain for their institution. And it can be a moment where a likely school becomes, a really enticing offer once you start to factor in all of the additional components. As those of you who have been on our webinars before, I actually ended up going to one of my likely schools as a undergraduate. And part of the reason why I did that was it was a academic, social, financial fit for myself and my family, but it came with a significant enough merit scholarship that I could attend this school for the price of, a local state institution. It came with support in the summer, so I could do an internship and travel and do research that I wanted to do with the school's support rather than trying to finance it on my own. So this can ultimately be one of the most important parts of the college list. So now that we've had that overview, you're starting to see already that identifying whether something is a reach school, a target, or a likely school is a bit of both a science and an art. There are these categories, but it can shift in state, out of state. Is yield something we need to consider? The common data set or Naviance is going to be the place to look here. And the last component that I want to identify here is that, especially this is something that comes up when families are considering test optional, your grades are going to be a better indication of whether or not a school is going to be a reach, a likely, or a target for you, because your grades are going to be essentially the result of sustained student effort over the course of 3 to 4 years versus an SAT score, which, although we know many students study very hard, spend a lot of time and energy on prepping for these tests, ultimately, in some ways, is going to be the result of 2 or 3 Saturdays over the course of the time. This is also the place where we'd advise students to be honest, to do a sincere assessment of what their academic profile looks like and build a list so that at the end of this process, they have options to choose from. You can always, we tell students if you're willing to put in the work and you have those 2 to 3 or even 4 likely schools, absolutely apply for the reach schools, apply for the targets, but be honest with yourself, especially when it comes to those likely schools, and make sure that you've correctly identified them. And then I think, Jordan, our next major question is, all right, we know we want some reaches, some targets, and some likelies, but how many of them should we be looking for?
Yeah, it's a question we get quite commonly. And you'll often hear the refrain that you need to have a balanced college list, 3 targets, reaches, 3 likelies. In our opinion, you don't necessarily need to have a balanced college list. In our opinion, as long as you have those 2 to 3 likelies that you are not just okay with going to, but you're excited to go to as well because they have everything that you need, that you've talked about the 4 kinds of fit, and you can see them each fitting there, then you can apply to whichever schools that you want to, as long as you are okay with the work that we'll need to put into it, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and also that it is that you are rather prepared to hear no if you're applying to more reach schools, right? The more reach schools you apply to, the more likely you're not going to hear a yes, only because of statistics. You might be a great fit for that institution, but they just have many more applicants than they can admit. So if you're okay with hearing no more often than not and applying over those reach schools because you just want to see what happens, then just go for it. But again, we really want to make sure that your 2 to 3 likely schools are really, really solid. And again, when we consider the work that needs to get done with all these college lists, that's an important consideration as well because you're all busy students, you're all doing so many things. So we want to go through a couple of scenarios and showcase how many essays it'll actually take to finish a list like this. Now, this is a list that we would actually advise. This is a list that makes sense. It's a big school feel, solid academics, lots of school spirits, primarily in the South. Um, but we're still negotiating how far we're going to go from home with parents, but then to appease them, we put Pitt and Penn State on there just to like
Okay,
it, right?
this is a list that makes sense.
if someone presented this list to me and said like, yes, I see where your thought process is here. And the best part about this list is that only one school has an essay required on here, and it is North Carolina State University, and they only have one essay required. Auburn, Alabama, Clemson, Delaware, all these schools do not have any sort of essay. So you just need to complete the common application essay or the personal statement, and then the one NC State essay, and then you're done writing with your applications. So again, you can apply to lots of schools without putting in a ton more work. On the flip side, though, you're going to end up applying to schools like this, which are great, right? Also great state schools, same mentality, same list, still in the South, still have great academics, still have lots of school spirit, still negotiating distance from home. But there are 20 essays required on this list. And there's also fewer schools on here too. Duke has three, for example. Florida has one. Georgia has one. Texas has four. So again, there's a lot of different variations in the amount of work that you'll have to do. So that's something to consider as you continue on with your college list. Then forget even adding honors colleges if you wanted to apply to, say, Penn State Schreier's Honors College, which has 10 essays in and of themselves. Again, we're not saying this to scare you. We're more so saying this to have this be something that you think about as you build your college list. Again, you're all busy students, you're all busy families. We really want you to be realistic about the amount of work that you're willing to put into this. But if you ever come to either us, if you decide to work with us, or a counselor, or whomever you're working with, and you say, I want to do this, we're going to be game, right? We're happy to work with you on all of this. But again, we just want to make sure that you are being realistic about the amount of work that needs to put in. Now, lots of conversations about not only how many schools should be on the list, but also a final college list. And in our opinion, building a college list is a really organic process. Things can come on and off the list, especially as you visit, as you learn more, as you define what's important to you, when you look within it and change a parameter that makes sense to you. Again, we want to make sure that there's really no deadline to having a college list, except, of course, the actual application deadlines. Don't add a school very late, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But again, we really want to make sure that you are allowing yourself to change the list as it goes along. You can expand your list in the midst of completing applications. Again, if you go back to that first college list, if you want to add Clemson on because it makes a lot of sense and suddenly it's somewhere that you want to go, then you can do that because there's no essays that are required there. So thinking about how to add strategically to your list can be a good way to add more likelies or more targets if that's something you're looking to do as well. And again, even after you're done with those essays, you can find out ways to do that too. But there is kind of a point where it's a little bit too late to add essays, right, Alyssa?
Yes. So essays are going to be one of the major components that admissions officers use to distinguish one applicant from another, especially when applicants have similar grades, similar rigor. You do want to allow yourself time to ensure that any application you submit is complete, is well revised, is well edited, is your best effort. So in many ways, one of the best things that you can do to give yourself the most time to think through your college list is get started early. Jordan, you and I are already meeting with juniors and starting to talk about this process and brainstorm for essays. And one of the advantages of beginning early is it gives you more wiggle room towards the end. We inevitably have a student who, in September of their senior year, after they've gone back to school and they're talking with their friends, looks into a school that they hadn't considered before and falls in love and wants to apply. And that is a lot easier to do in a way that is going to produce a thoughtful application when a lot of the work has already been done. So that you can go, all right, our first student there who only had the one essay. If we're done by August when they come to us and go, all right, I know it's a reach, but Wake Forest looks amazing. We're able to go, we do have the time to do those extra essays with you because we got started early and got that taken care of. Yes. We're going to pivot away from the list as a big document and talk a little bit about college visits, starting off with, in a sense, the big myth. You can absolutely build a college list without setting foot on campus at any point. There are a lot of good reasons to visit campus, but we'll talk about a lot of different ways to research throughout the rest of the presentation. But you can build a thoughtful college list without visiting schools. Should you choose to visit a school, the other component is to make sure that you get the most out of your college visit. For many families, this is going to be, a substantial time commitment. You might be driving, you might be staying overnight. Either way, this is an expenditure of time and energy. So a standard visit is going to include, of course, a tour and an info session. But what you can do what you can do is try and reach out before and after. See what opportunities there are for you on that campus. Can you visit a class? Can you join, for instance, a specific tour for your specific major or the specific school that you're interested in applying to? And while you are there, pay attention to your sense of what the school is. We often, for students in our area, recommend doing something called the Philly tour. You visit Temple, Drexel, Penn, Haverford, those types of schools, because your visceral reaction to a school can tell you a lot about that category of school. Do you want big or small? If you visit Haverford College and it feels small and claustrophobic, that tells you a lot about how you feel about small liberal arts colleges. And then maybe you don't need to fly to California to visit, Pomona College because it's just going to be small and claustrophobic with, better weather. Those are things that college visits can help you with. The other component that you're going to want to do on a visit is try and take thoughtful, specific notes. If there is an event that you see a flyer for that seems interesting, jot it down. If you have a great conversation with a professor or the tour guide, jot that down. Put down the names of the people you talk to, because this allows you to go beyond the marketing flyers and write a why college essay, an essay that explains why you want to attend that specific university in a way that's going to be thoughtful and specific. Write this down somewhere, by the way, that you're going to be able to find it 6 months later. Many students visit schools well before they start writing any supplemental essays to that effect. So making sure that when you get to it and you're going, okay, what was the name of the admissions officer that we talked to at Wake Forest, at Tulane, at Pitt? Though Pitt does not have a Y college essay. It makes it easier when you can go back and reference that material, and it allows you to write an essay that lets you imagine yourself at that college, and that is ultimately what those essays are going to be. That being said, we started this section with the idea that you do not need to visit a school to form a college list, and that is because some of the best research can be done at home. There are, in the age of the internet, I cannot believe how old I just made myself sound. A lot of research can happen without leaving your house. Of course, admissions officers likely come to your high school. These are great opportunities to speak to them, but you can also take other opportunities, such as, you have a network. If you know a friend who went to a school, maybe, if you're a junior, someone who was a senior last year and is now a freshman at that school, relatives who might have attended those schools. You can reach out to admissions officers and faculty to ask questions. Please make sure you're not asking them a question that you could find on their website. But if there is a specific question that you have, feel free to reach out. You can look at the school's social media or look on other social media to see what, students at that specific university are talking about and thinking about. There is a whole network of people who have personal, detailed, firsthand knowledge of a school that you can reach out to. You also have, of course, the power of search engines, but bear in mind, try and use this effectively. Try and search entire phrases, the best college for a flexible curriculum as opposed to flexible curriculum, because otherwise you're going to get that AI window up top that just defines what flexible curriculum is for you. Or using sites like Niche or College Simply that allow you to compare one school to the other can be a great choice. Or even thinking about what matters to you in a school. If what matters to you is a traditional high spirit university experience, you can check out ESPN and see what schools are playing. And then from there, use that to start whittling down your college search. We really do recommend using Google rather than trying to navigate college websites. Our students who we help research for Y College Essays will know just how terrible most college websites are. It's almost impossible to navigate to find anything of use. So Googling, for instance, University of Michigan majors and minors is going to get you to their list of majors and minors a lot more quickly than simply going to University of Michigan's homepage and attempting to navigate from there. Once you are on the website, try and dive a little deeper. The admissions page is going to be designed by marketing firms. It will be slick and beautiful, but it may not tell you that much about the school. So for that reason, department websites are going to be a great place to look. The school's own social media will be useful, as well as YouTube, both the official ones, but also students will post college tours of their own. All of these are going to be really strong resources to help you identify, things that you need to know about the college. And I know we just threw an awful lot of information at you, and there is probably a couple of people in the audience who are going, I don't have any idea where to start. This seems overwhelming, but Jordan.
I'm here to make sure that you all know that you have time. It's February of your junior years, or if you're younger than that, and you have plenty of time to explore all the options that are in front of you. And again, you can start a lot of the research at home, as Alyssa was just talking about as well. When you do eventually tackle the college application process, starting with the components that every single app, or rather every single college will need, the activities section on the Common Application, the education section, and most importantly, the Common Application essay. Every school needs that with very few exceptions. So starting there and getting those basics out of the way will help set you up for success for them when you do have a better idea as far as which schools you're applying to, that you can then go and tackle their school specific supplements as well. As you develop the list, taking a step back a little bit, again, do things in your local area, like going to visit colleges in your local area. Even if you have sworn off staying anywhere close to home, that's completely okay. Because again, if you go see the local large public state school near you and you say this is amazing or this is terrible, you then have a better way of narrowing down your focus and figuring out those kind of components, especially of physical fit and also social fit as well. And also consider the types of fit as we were talking about at the beginning of the process to think about what's important to you. And we also recommend developing a personal mission statement, things that you want to get out of a college experience and the ways that you want to, again, define your college years successfully. I will say that thinking about what your college list, or rather what your personal mission statement is really important. Taking some time to develop that can be helpful. I will say that mine, when I was applying to college way back in the day, was that I wanted to study architecture at an urban university at a place that was far from home, not necessarily in my home state, and somewhere that I could also play ultimate frisbee. And I liked cold weather, so I wanted to be somewhere that was a little bit colder than where I grew up in North Carolina. Um, I don't live in cold weather now, but that's okay. But Alyssa, what would your personal statement be?
So in this case, when I was applying to schools, I knew I wanted sort of a smaller, more intimate feel. I wanted that sort of small liberal arts college. I actually did visit Haverford College. I'm local to this area and went, oh yes, this is the right vibe for me. I wanted a small liberal arts college. I wanted to be able to study abroad in a place in France that was not Paris. Um, you know, finances were a little bit of a concern for me. I needed a place that was going to give me a decent amount of merit money. And also, I wanted to be far enough away from home that my parents couldn't show up without calling me. Sorry, mom and dad. But also close enough that I could go home for a weekend if I wanted. So, it sounds like, you know, our list would have ended up being, pretty different, even though, I'm not going to pry into your grades, Jordan, but I imagine you were a pretty good student too.
I did well. Calculus was hard, but other than that, I was okay. Um,
Calculus is hard in general for anyone.
it really is. And we don't have to bemoan math, but at the same time, thinking about the components that are incredibly important to you as a student can help you, again, narrow down the college list while also working in conjunction with all the strategies we talked about earlier today. But ultimately, the most important part of this process is to take a look within and really consider what you want. What do you want to get out of the 4 years that you were on campus? Because you're not just finding a school to attend, you're finding a home for 4 years. And superficial factors are completely okay, right? Going on vibes is totally fine. Thinking about what weather, how far away from home, all that is okay. And you have a lot of really great tools for you to use. However, no matter which tool you use for your college search, whether that be Google, ChatGPT, us, a college counselor, you aren't going to get good results unless you define what you want. So thinking really critically about what's important to you, where do you want to be, what do you want to study, who do you want to be around? These questions can help you get to some answers before starting or before you stare at a blank sheet and say, okay, here's my college list. But also thinking about casting a wide net, really take a look and leave no stone unturned to make sure that you're finding the schools that work for you. And also, it's okay to not necessarily know just yet, but be in the exploratory process as you consider moving forward. I spoiled it, but here is the personal mission statement that I had as well. Again, thinking about what is important to you as you move forward in this college process too. So, where do we come in? How do Alyssa and I help students think about this entire process from the very beginning to the end? We support you on every component of this process. Again, from thinking about the college list to thinking about the common application essay and all the components along that. It's advising, it's having project management also to keep you focused on the task in front of you so that you can finish all of these essays and all of the work required to apply to college within a timely manner. We want to make sure that you're going to mention or that you're going to meet these deadlines and that you're going to be in a good spot once those deadlines come around as well. We're also able to have holistic college conversations, colleges conversations. If you say, I like schools like this, we can say, great, let's consider schools like that. Our mentality is much more about teach a student to fish and they eat for a lifetime. So we'll give you the research tools, we'll walk you through a common data set, for example, to see how you can interpret that. However, if you do need a little bit more assistance, we do have a college list service where you'll fill out a survey. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to do so. And it's very objective. So lots of things about, or lots of questions rather, about your grades, about your GPA, about which court, or rather about which majors you're interested in, geographically where you want to go. And then we'll spit out a list of 15 to 30 schools for you to consider. But that's not us saying that you should go there or apply there. It's mostly just us starting the conversation and giving you some options to consider as well. So again, we're here to help you along every step of the way of this process. And we want to make sure that you're supported if you end up working with us as well.
So thank you very much for joining us. I already see we have some really great questions in the Q&A, so we can go ahead and start to address those. And Jordan, as you are the former admissions officer, I'm going to ask you this one. How do colleges calculate GPA, weighted or unweighted, so that they are comparing apples to apples?
It will really depend. I've worked at schools that will recalculate GPAs and make sure that everyone's on a level playing field, and the college will actually apply their own version of weighting to it. So they'll say a certain number of AP classes are worth this grade point or something else. Some other colleges I've worked at have just used an unweighted GPA. Some other colleges I've worked at have just taken what's on the transcript and then kind of evaluated you within your high school context, less student to student. So ultimately, it'll depend on each individual school. But as you look at your GPA, um, thinking about generally where you're sitting, right? If you're mostly A's, you're probably going to be on the 3.8 and above scale, right? There's A's and B's, and it'll be lower than that, right? So roughly estimating where you fall if your school doesn't offer an unweighted GPA, that can be a way to compare and take a look at that component of the common data set.
And I think one of the components to bear in mind is that admissions officers do know that every school is going to calculate GPAs differently. Many schools, as you've said, recalculate GPAs according to their own like specific special sauce. But keeping in mind that as you are applying to schools, um, that one of the things that will go out as part of a student's application that the counselor takes care of, besides, of course, sending the transcript, sending their own counselor recommendation letter, is going to be something called the school profile, which offers information about how your school calculates GPA, the types of courses that are made available to students, any restrictions. For instance, I know there are some schools that don't allow freshman or sophomore students to take AP courses, those sorts of notes, so that when an admissions officer is evaluating the GPA, that they are taking into consideration all of those components, so they are able to evaluate you po- as fairly as possible. All right. Um, Jordan, I'll throw one more to you here. For likely schools, and I think this is something you can answer for many of our schools, how do you demonstrate interest?
Yeah, demonstrated interest is a component in some colleges' application processes, which basically means, are you actually interested in applying there? As we talked about earlier, targets being a kind of dying breed because a lot of schools are hedging their bets against the highly achieving students. So how do you say no to Lane? I promise I'm really interested in going here. Honestly, one way that you can do that is just emailing your admission officer and saying as much. Having conversation with your admission officer and saying, this is somewhere I really want to go. Please let me know what else I can do, things like that. But some other basic ways can be to attend a high school visit if a counselor from that college is attending. Additionally, you can do a campus visit while you're there. They might also attend high school, or rather, college fairs that are close to you as well, whether it be like a national college fair like NACAC or a high school hosted one as well. If there's any card or information to fill out, you're going to fill out the same information all the time, but at least you get the points for being there. But then also things as simple as opening emails can be considered demonstrated interest, or clicking around their website and spending time on their website as well can show that you're actually doing the research and you're thinking about whether Tulane, for example, or American University is a good fit for you. So lots of different ways you can do it. A lot of it is electronically as well, but if you happen to have the physical, rather the ability to go do the physical demonstrated interest factors, you can do that as well.
All right. I'm also going to steal my one of the questions that allows me to talk about my favorite topic real quickly. We had someone ask about the types of essays that a student might potentially have to write. So in the college application process, there is going to be, and I'm referring to the Common App here, the University of California system has their own, specific questions that they ask, but students will write one essay that goes everywhere, which is meant to show who they are as a person, their personality, what makes them tick. There are usually 7 prompts for that essay, the seventh of which is submit a topic on, you know, of the student's choice. Common App. So the Scuttlebutt should be releasing their prompts for this upcoming year tomorrow. We would be surprised if it changes. They've changed exactly one prompt in the past decade. But that would be the first type of essay that a student has to write. After that, for the supplement or school-specific essays that, we mentioned when we had our list of schools and the one student who was applying to Duke, Wake Forest, Georgia, Florida, having to write about 20, there are going to be a couple major categories. One of the most common is going to be an explanation of why the student is interested in that given school or in their given major. It's also common to ask students to unpack or explain a little bit about their most significant activity, and what their role in it is. It's also very common to have an essay prompt about a community that the student feels connected to or an aspect of their identity that they want to sort of unpack and say more about. But there's also many miscellaneous prompts, many fun ones. University of Vermont for a while had an essay prompt, which was what type of ice cream you would be and why, because they're so close to the Ben and Jerry's factory, which is always one of my favorites to work on. But that is going to give you a quick overview of what those essay types are like. Right. We also had, is there an online tool to put your criteria in and it shares a list of possible schools? There are quite a few resources that are going to be like this. Big Futures is the one that is run by College Board. College Simply is going to be similar to this. There are, I'm about to show my age again, but I'm sure many of the like older family members in the audience here remember like the big books of lists of schools like Princeton Review or Fisk or Kaplan that you could flip through. Many of those sites are also going to have their own sort of digital version of that where you can start to enter criteria and see that sense of what schools are going to be, are going to meet that particular criteria. All right. Um, we also have a question about how does the college search change for students who are interested in athletic programs and being recruited. And one of the things that is going to happen there is that search is often going to start earlier, especially for D1 schools, because the coach is going to have such an impact and a say on how this process goes. And in some ways, it means that the college search is a little more constrained because you are then looking for the schools that offer your sport and that you are competitive in that particular field. Jordan, I don't know if there's anything you would want to add to that.
Yeah, there are lots of rules, especially in Division One, around coaches contacting students and whether that can actually happen. That can't happen until the student's junior year. However, at any point, any student can reach out to a coach and start that conversation by either saying, "Hey, I'm interested in playing X sport at Y institution. Here's some statistics. Here's a highlight reel if that would be helpful. What else do you need from me?" To start to have that conversation and at least be in contact with the coach. A lot of the submission process, as Alyssa said, is then dictated by the coach Timelines are sometimes different, requirements are sometimes different. Sometimes might go through something called a pre-read, which is a kind of mini application that the admission office basically screens and says, yes, this is good to go, or gives feedback and has a conversation that way. But either way, talking with the coach that you're interested in playing, especially at the D1 level, would be a good way and a good place to start. Coaches can reach out once you're a junior, but before that, you can reach out, or the student can reach out directly to the coach.
All right. We also had a question about thank you cards after a tour. It's always, it's a thoughtful way to be in touch with an admissions officer. Especially if you took our advice and you've reached out early, if your regional admissions officer was able to assist you with sitting in on a class, with joining a specific tour, reaching out and acknowledging, hey, thank you for telling me there was a specific tour at 5 p.m. for business people. I found it really helpful. It's one of those points of contact for demonstrated interest, and also like admissions officers are people, they like to feel warm and fuzzy and feel like they've helped a student. So although we wouldn't recommend just constantly bombarding your admissions officer in this particular case, that's a great moment to try and reach out. All right. I think that is all of the questions that we're going to have time for today. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have anything you would want to discuss. You can book a call with Jordan or myself in the links that we put in the chat. We'll also be reaching out with a follow-up email after this webinar, including a link. So please feel free to share this with anyone who you think might find this advice useful. And we're wishing all of you a good night.
Everyone.